We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Saturday. Now, this is going to be kind of a weird podcast because there's really no rhyme or reason to it. I'm all by myself. I haven't put together any emails or anything like that. I haven't put together much of anything at all because just a short time ago, I got off a plane. I left Savannah earlier today, drove to Orlando, flew out from Orlando, landed in Minneapolis, and here I am at about almost 1 a.m. on Saturday morning. It's much later than I normally do it. I always have some kind of plan of what I'm going to do. There's some topics we need to talk about, but I'm tired and I'm a little ornery. So I'm not sure how this is all going to go, but we'll give it the best shot. The bottom line is, I always say I'm going to do a podcast every day. So I'm here like your dancing monkey to do the show, doing what dancing monkeys do. Nah, I'm kidding. I wouldn't do it if I didn't feel like doing it. I'm still a little wired up from the flight, so I might as well sit here and talk about some of the absolute shit show that's been going on. And it's been absolutely crazy. Fortunately, we've been able to keep up the process while I was down in Savannah. Even when I was down in Orlando last night, I was able to do a live on TikTok, which turned out pretty well, actually. Toward the end, it got a little crazy because we got a Trumplefuck that found his way in there somehow. Um, I felt sorry for the Trumplefuck, though. I mean, you think about it. In that room was myself, TJ, Eric, Will, and Rebecca, all ganging up on this one guy. Yeah, actually, I didn't feel sorry for him. He was a dumbass, and I think he proved that was the case, that he wasn't a very smart human being and didn't have many answers. He told me about all the things that he loved that Donald Trump did or will do. And I said, well, go think back to the first term. What is it that he did that was so great during that first term? And damned if he couldn't come up with an answer. He had a couple half answers, but he didn't know the name. He wasn't a bright man, but he's pretty representative of Trumplefucks. I mean, he might have been one of the smarter Trumplefucks, believe it or not, because I've dealt with some dumber ones, a lot dumber ones. But let's talk about what happened yesterday. There's a lot of things, frankly, but probably the biggest story is we've all been waiting to see if Pete Hegseth, the former Fox News moderator, was going to be confirmed as Secretary of Defense. Probably the biggest department in the government, much bigger than Pete Hegseth has ever run. And any group or organization that he's run into the ground. And there were all kinds of problems. Not to mention he has a drinking problem. Not to mention he has a problem with abusing women. Not to mention he has a problem with adultery and lying and cheating and stealing and doing all those fucking things. Now, when Donald Trump first brought him up as a possible candidate, no way they're going to put this guy in. Not even the Republicans can possibly vote for this motherfucker. But then as time went on and they had the hearing, for some reason, the Republicans started to like Pete Hegseth better. Said he showed up pretty well. Well, he did speak clearly. He's kind of cocky. He didn't come off like he was confused or anything. That said, he never answered a question directly. Um, he always blamed every crime that he committed on some unnamed anonymous source, which wasn't true. There were a lot of witnesses and a lot of names. But he was apparently able to gaslight the Republicans. And this is what it comes down to. The way the vote went, it was close. Now, keep in mind, in the Senate, Republicans have 53 seats. The Democrats have 47 seats. So the Republicans have a 3-seat advantage. Okay. When the vote happened, it was a tie, 50-50. That means 3 Republicans voted against Pete Hegseth. And who were those 3 Republicans that voted against him? A couple of obvious ones: Susan Collins of Maine, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, And here's the surprise one: Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell of Kentucky stood in opposition to Pete Hegseth becoming the director of the Defense Department, which was a good choice. I mean, the guy's not qualified. He's a fucking complete idiot and little corrupt, little incompetent, and a sexual predator. All those things I would think would disqualify you from holding high office in our government. But apparently 50, actually 51 Republicans thought otherwise. So when the vote came down, it was a 50-50 tie. Now we know what happens when there's a 50-50 tie. The vice president of the United States, who's the president of the Senate, then casts the tiebreaker. Can't imagine what J.D. Vance would do in that situation. Of course, he voted for Pete Hegseth. So guess what? Now we've got Pete Hegseth as the director of the Defense Department, the defense secretary. It's the first time in U.S. history that a defense secretary was confirmed by a tie vote in the Senate. But can you believe Mitch McConnell? Not even Mitch McConnell could figure out a way to vote for this motherfucker, but 50 other Republicans did. Now, all these other Republicans know this is a horrible candidate, but they're just catering to Donald Trump as they have in the past and as they continue to do. And I don't think they believe this is going to impact their reelection things. They're just appealing to Donald Trump. They don't really have a choice at this point. It's going to be different when there are bills that will cost people money, have bad optics, and we'll talk about that more later. But in this one, 50 Republican senators knelt to Donald Trump and hired a completely unqualified, incompetent motherfucker. Now, I know a lot of you are nervous about that. And here's the only thing we can do. We can say, oh, we got to stop it. We can't stop it. We can't stop it. The complicity of the Republican Party is there in the Senate, and they made it happen. So all we can do is sit back and wait to see what happens in this situation. I mean, this guy is going to screw up immensely. He's going to embarrass himself. He's going to embarrass Donald Trump. He probably won't be there long. And some people will say, well, Mike, how can you say that? Well, understand this. In Donald Trump's first 4-year term, in his first 4-year term, he had 5 defense secretaries. None of them lasted. I think the last one was Esper, and he was okay, and he rounded it out for the end of the term. So the likelihood that this goofball doesn't do something to embarrass Donald Trump and get his ass fired, it's probably likely. Mainly what he's going to do is he's going to be an embarrassment, not only for Donald Trump, not only for the Republicans, for the country at large. So it's something we have to deal with, and we have to watch it happen, knowing that it won't turn out well for Donald or Pete Hegseth. But they got to try, right? They got to fucking try. Now, Hegseth is a 44-year-old veteran who has vowed to end woke military policies. He was nominated by then President-elect Donald Trump in November, to the bewilderment of much of the National Security Committee. He is set to begin his job as the least experienced defense secretary in history. I mean, it's absolutely a joke. Republicans defended the pick, saying that an unconventional leader with experience outside government is needed to shake up the department and restore American strength abroad. How are you going to do that if you don't know what you're fucking doing? Those who initially expressed concerns were quickly met with threats of primaries by Trump allies. Now, see, that's the thing. There were a lot of Republicans that said, oh, I don't like this guy. This isn't a good move. I would never vote for him. And then Donald Trump's cronies start calling up, listen, bitch, if you don't vote for this guy, we're going to primary you. And I don't understand why that's so scary to some Republicans, because he did it in the last election. And it didn't turn out too well for Donald Trump. The problem with it is Donald Trump is crazy and says stupid things, and for some reason he gets away with it. But when his acolytes or his little cult members try to do the same thing, it doesn't turn out as well. It never turns out as well. So I don't know. They're cowards. Frankly, they're fucking cowards. And that's the unfortunate thing. And that's what we're dealing with now. That's why we told you prior to the election, we got to get as many Republicans the fuck out of there as possible. That said, we didn't get enough out. In fact, we lost some ground in the Senate. We lost control of the Senate, and we handed them a 3-seat margin. Now, when Mitch McConnell voted no, that was kind of a surprise. In a statement shortly after his vote, McConnell pointed to Hegseth's lack of experience for the role that oversees 3 million people employed by the armed services and manages a nearly $1 trillion budget. You got a drunken sex predator who doesn't have the qualification and is completely incompetent, and he's running the Defense Department. That's almost as crazy as taking a reality TV star who has a screw loose and making him president. I guess it seems fitting given what the American public decided we needed in the Oval Office. Mere desire to be a change agent isn't enough to fill these shoes, McConnell said in the statement, which made no mention of the abuse allegations against Hegseth. Now, during his confirmation hearing, Democrats grilled Hegseth about his resume, his past vocal opposition to women serving in combat roles, accusations of financial mismanagement at veterans organizations he led, and the allegations of domestic and alcohol abuse leveled against him. Now, I will say this, Pete says, if I get the gig, I'll just quit drinking. I think he has to, because the Secretary of Defense is a 24-hour-a-day job. You can't get a call at 2 a.m. and be passed out, blacked out, drunk, and be incoherent. Want to bet he does? Want to bet he doesn't quit drinking? Want to bet that this power doesn't go to his head and he decides that he's going to do whatever he wants? Now, it recently came out that he paid $50,000 to a woman who accused him of sexual assault in 2017. Now, this is an incident he denied. And I don't know about you. If I didn't sexually assault a woman, I'm not going to pay her $50,000 to keep her mouth shut. If I didn't do it, I'm going to fight this. And I know I'm going to win because I know I didn't do it. The motherfucker did it. That's what kind of human being he is. And that's what kind of human being the Republicans handed off to the United States of America. Good job, guys. Now, earlier this week, senators also reviewed a sworn affidavit containing more allegations against Hegseth, including that his second ex-wife feared for her safety during their marriage, and that he regularly abused alcohol to the point of passing out at family gatherings. Both Hegseth and his second wife denied there was any physical abuse in their marriage. So his wife denied there was any physical abuse. Now consider that when you consider what I said earlier. His ex-wife feared for her safety during their marriage. You think she might be fearing for her safety now since he's got this high position in government? Yeah, I think that might be part of it. Now, although most Republicans dismissed the allegations, Murkowski said Hegseth's history and excessive behaviors he has admitted to demonstrate a lack of judgment that is unbecoming of someone who would lead our armed forces. Collins, meanwhile, said she had concerns about Hegseth's ability to run a government agency with 3 million employees and a budget of $850 billion. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer practically begged Republicans to pick someone else for the job, suggesting that many Republican senators would be more appropriate than Hegseth. He said, "Is this the man with a known history of excessive drinking? The guy you want on the other end of the phone at 2 a.m. in a crisis in control of nuclear codes?" Schumer asked. Who are we kidding? And Schumer is exactly right. I mean, Jesus Christ. This guy is so inept. I mean, it's like Donald Trump saying, let's take the worst, most fucked up person and put him in the most important position. And I'm going to do that because I think it's right. And everything I think is absolutely genius. That's pretty much what we're looking at here. That's absolutely what we're looking at. Now, there was another kind of a villain in this whole process. Social media critics raked Republican Senator Tom Tillis over the coals after he, along with Vice President J.D. Vance, proved to be the deciding votes to confirm former Fox News Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense. I think a lot of people were thinking Tom Tillis was going to vote against him. But again, apparently he got some call from one of Donald Trump's cronies and said, "You want to get primaried?" No, no, no. I got to keep my job. I got to keep my power. I got to keep the money. So the overall vote count Friday night, as I said, was 51-50 with three Republican senators, Collins, Murkowski, and Mitch McConnell, all breaking ranks, forcing Vance to break the tie. Hegseth was a hot button for Trump, the administration. They really wanted him for some reason, and I can't understand why. He faced serious questions about both his qualifications to run the Pentagon, allegations that he committed sexual assault, and had a serious drinking problem. There's compelling evidence that all these things were true. And to be perfectly honest with you, if you wanted to make him some lower level official, that's fine. But this is maybe one of the most important positions in all of government. And you take the most unqualified, the most unsavory, the most immoral, the most unethical human being and put him in that position. That's disturbing to say the least. So social media users blasted Tillis, whose vote was said to be up in the air heading into the vote. As the vote got underway late Friday, Hegseth shared on X a letter he sent to Tillis addressing Tillis's request for a detailed answer to the allegations outlined by his former sister-in-law. Now, of course, Tom Tillerson is up for re-election in 2026. Not surprising. He provided pretty much the deciding vote. Tom Tillis should hope for the sake of his electoral future that Hegseth doesn't lead the U.S. military into a catastrophe. See, that's the thing. They're worried about getting primaried by Donald Trump. But what's going to happen when Pete Hegseth fucks up? And much like Donald Trump, you can almost guarantee that Pete Hegseth will fuck up because you're putting him in a position that he doesn't know. I mean, even if he doesn't get drunk or sexually assault somebody, the fact that he doesn't know what he's doing, he's going to fuck up. Just hope it's not absolutely disastrous. Hopefully, it's just fucking embarrassing at this point. Now, in a separate post, he wrote, "Very excited to see what happens when you make a deeply compromised addict the leader of the Department of Defense and subordinate to a madman. Tom Tillis is afraid Mark Robinson is going to primary him. He knows Hegseth is unqualified and can't do the job. Goddamn coward," wrote Democratic strategist Mike Nellis on Blue Sky. And that, in essence, is what the problem is with Republicans at this point. They're absolute cowards. They were cowards the 4 years Donald Trump was president. They were cowards when he wasn't president and he was running for election. They get these situations where they know it's just wrong. I mean, it's so obviously wrong, and they still stick with Donald Trump. How many failures does Donald Trump have to have before people say, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to buy into that? I don't think that's a good idea. Well, apparently not yet. Not yet. It's a pretty sad state of affairs in our government. And as I've said, a lot of people are terrified at the prospect of Donald Trump being president. They're terrified of Pete Hegseth being in charge of the Defense Department, as well we should. But what can we do about it? Right now, nothing. Donald Trump was elected. He nominated Pete Hegseth, and the Republicans elected him to be the director of defense. What can we do about it? Well, the only thing we can really do about it is sit back and wait for them to fuck up and embarrass them and find out how long it takes before the Republicans have had enough. Now, as I've said, Pete Hegseth is the Secretary of Defense. That job with Donald Trump doesn't have a history of lasting very long. And I would suggest that Pete Hegseth probably won't last long in the position. He'll embarrass Donald Trump, and Donald Trump will blame him instead of taking the blame himself. And then he will get fired, and some other clown will come in. That's essentially what's going to happen. We saw it in the first term. I mean, think about everybody that was in Donald Trump's cabinet. Think about that. Every one of them was either fired, quit, or indicted. And all of them were ridiculed by Donald Trump. This is why he can't get any good candidates. He had a few relatively decent candidates in the first term, but it didn't go well for them. It didn't bode well for them. So nobody with any sense is going to want to be on Donald Trump's cabinet. So we're stuck with goofballs. And this is what happens when you elect a fuckhead like Donald Trump. Again, people will say, we got to fight, we got to fight. And that's true, we've got to fight. But there's only so much we can do with the way the government has played out at this point. As Democrats, we really can't impeach Donald Trump. Now, I've heard some rumors that there are some Republicans that are pretty appalled about the release of the 1,600 insurrectionists. They're going to be upset about this in the House, probably. Some Republicans, not most, but some, enough. There was some talk that if there was an impeachment hearing in the House and it passed, that there might be enough votes on the Republican side to actually convict Donald Trump. And this is something I've talked about before. Donald Trump right now is a liability. He's no longer an asset to the Republican Party. They needed him to get elected in 2024. However, now all he can do is fuck things up. Now all he can do is embarrass people. And quite frankly, that's what he's doing. I mean, he gave this speech, it was an economic conference in Davos, Switzerland. He did it virtually. And he was unhinged, went off on tangents, did crazy shit. And there was literal laughing amongst the other dignitaries at this conference. I don't know if he realized it or if he saw it or he thought he was just some comedian and that he was incredibly talented humor-wise. But he is a joke. And that's the interesting thing we find these days. When Donald Trump was president the first time around, there were a lot of countries that were absolutely terrified because they didn't know what he would do. Much the same the way people felt when Ronald Reagan came in. He seemed like a hair trigger, if you will. And Donald Trump certainly falls within that category. They didn't know what he would do, so they walked very softly. Well, that's not happening anymore. These people are calling him out. We've got a high-level politician from Denmark telling Donald Trump to fuck off. I love that. We've got people in an audience at an economic conference laughing at him because of what he's saying is so absolutely fucking ridiculous. He bitched about NATO. He bitched about the election, the 2020 election, everything, having nothing to do with economics. All he can say is, oh, the economy is going to be great when I get in. Well, that's well and good, Donnie, but what are you going to do? You didn't do anything the first time, but give a tax break to the wealthy. That's not going to do well for the country's economy. In fact, many experts are suggesting that it will crash the economy. And if that starts to happen, I tell you what, you're going to see the Republicans getting a little hinky. They're not going to like that because while Donald Trump doesn't have to be reelected, the rest of them do. And if the economy goes to shit, none of them are going to get reelected. So it's going to be interesting to see if they do want to try to pull the 25th Amendment or or an impeachment. It's going to have to be something that's led by the Republicans. And when you see what happened with the Pete Hegseth confirmation, you think, oh, they'll never do that. Yeah, don't be surprised. Pete Hegseth is one thing. But when you're fucking with pissing off all of the country, and frankly, Donald Trump is doing a great job at that right now. We'll talk more about that later. But they're going to look at it differently. And if they see things that are just outright stupid, like cutting Medicaid and cutting veterans benefits, that's what's in their budget now that they want to present. Because remember, they got to get some, at least a continuing resolution again in March in order to keep the government open. It's a little different situation this time. They have control. They have the power. Well, they had the power in the House last time, but not really because they're so divided. But they're going to come in. Donald Trump wanted a big, beautiful bill, as he said, with all kinds of cuts, all ridiculous cuts, none of which can pass. It's not going to pass the House, certainly not the Senate. You know, that's the thing. And I keep talking about this. Every time Donald Trump says something like birthright citizenship, we're going to get rid of it. Everybody goes, oh no, he's absolutely getting rid of it. Well, it's not that easy. He's not a king yet. He can't just say, I want this, and that happens. In fact, with the birthright citizenship, it went to a judge, and the judge says, this is mind boggling. This is stupid. This is blatantly unconstitutional. And he said, no, you don't get it. Now, Donald Trump will appeal it. But remember how much luck Donald Trump has had with appeals. It hasn't gone very well for him in the past. And this is absolutely contradictory to the Constitution. Not even the Supreme Court is going to allow something like that. And again, the Supreme Court may not be as complicit with Donald Trump in this situation now because they've got nothing to gain from Donald Trump. I honestly believe, and I think that a lot of people are concerned that there's going to be these mass changes with Medicare and Social Security and veterans benefits and that sort of stuff. I don't really think that's going to happen because in order to get anything passed in the House, they need the Republicans need the help of the Democrats, and certainly the Democrats are never going to buy into that sort of shit. The Republicans in the House are so divided they can't agree on anything themselves. The Senate's a little different situation, as we saw with the Pete Hegseth confirmation. But in the House, especially with some bills that could do some bad things to this country, you're not going to see as many Republicans complying with Donald Trump. They're going to push back. We've already seen that with him wanting to increase the debt ceiling or take the debt ceiling limit off. I always found that kind of funny. Donald Trump came in here based on telling people we're going to cut spending. Trillions are going to be cut out of spending. But yet somehow he wants to increase the debt ceiling by $4 trillion. That doesn't that doesn't math right. That doesn't make any sense. It's something we as Democrats and independents have always understood. Donald Trump rarely knows what he's talking about. Donald Trump is always lying. Now, if we could just get the Republicans to understand that and believe that, maybe we would get somewhere, but not yet, because in November 5th, 49% of the Republicans in this country voted to elect Donald Trump. All right, motherfuckers, you asked for it. Now you're going to get it. It's not going to be a pleasant time. And I will tell you this, for me and a lot of other creators and all of you out there, we're going to shove it down your fucking throat every goddamn time. Promise. I'm going to have a good time making fun of you and telling you how stupid you are and watching you fail. It's going to be entertaining. It may not be pleasant to go through, but it might be a little entertaining. So Donald Trump did one thing that is kind of normal for presidents of the United States. He went out and surveyed some areas that were part of natural disaster, surveyed the wreckage, the rubble. He was in North Carolina. And of course, we know that a hurricane went through there. There are still people suffering. There are still people struggling with what happened there. And of course, they need help. We know FEMA has been of some help there. And Donald Trump, not being able to read the room, said something about, yeah, I don't think FEMA's doing a really good job. I think I might get rid of FEMA. Well, that's good. You want to get rid of FEMA? Okay, let's do that. Because when hurricane season starts, and it's all the red states that get hit, like North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Alabama, Louisiana, Georgia, when they all get hit and they need help because they're red states and they're broke ass states and they can't get it from Donald Trump, how do you think that's going to go? So I would say, Donald, go ahead. Shut down FEMA. Why not? Donald Trump is nothing but a destructor. He doesn't build anything. He doesn't improve anything. Anything that he does do has to somehow benefit him. So you want to do that's that's the attitude I'm kind of at right now. We are where we are. We put us where we are. So that's what you want? Okay, fuck it. Let's do it. Do it. And people say you can't do that because you got to fight back. Well, right now with some of these situations, there's not much we can actually fucking do. We can't do much except sit back and watch them fail and watch them burn themselves down. And yes, I know there will be innocent people that are hurt in the process. And trust me, I hate that as much as the next guy. But how do you stop it? How do you stop somebody like Pete Hegseth from being the Secretary of Defense? Apparently, we can't do it. How do you stop Donald Trump from becoming president of the United States in spite of being a convicted felon, an adjudicated rapist, and all the other things? If the people vote for that, all right. I've often said that if you vote for something, you deserve what you're going to get. And again, the unfortunate thing is there's going to be a lot of innocent people that will get some things too. And I hate that. But what are we going to do? What the fuck are we going to do in that situation? Now, it's interesting. Donald Trump also went to California to survey what the fires have done in the Los Angeles area. And he got off the plane. Gavin Newsome, or as Donald Trump typically calls him, Gavin Newscum, met him on the tarmac. And apparently there were some pleasantries passed back and forth. Now, clearly, these two do not like each other. Donald Trump wasn't quite as tough when he was standing in front of Newsome. I think Newsom's a little taller than he is, younger and better looking than he is, and maybe Donnie was a little intimidated. In fact, I guarantee you he was fucking intimidated. Newsome basically said, "We're counting on you. We need your help." And Trump said to the firemen and firewomen, "We won't let you down." Now, prior to this meeting, Donald Trump did say something that was a little disconcerting. He said, I think there should be some strings tied to any federal help with California, meaning we should have a mandatory voting, having IDs for voting, which they don't have in California. The idea that a president would coerce or try to leverage a state while they're having natural disaster and a tragedy in their state to get them to force them to do his bidding. That's absolutely repugnant. That's absolutely ridiculous. But that's exactly what Donald Trump and some other Republican members of Congress have said. Now, will he be able to pull that off? I doubt it. because as much as California is a Democratic state, there's a lot of wealthy Republicans there too. They lost houses, they lost property. So, how this will all play out, I don't know. But the good news for California is Donald Trump, as we've said before, is easily manipulated. And Gavin Newsom, as much as he hates Donald Trump, he's a pretty smart guy. And I think he may very well have the ability to manipulate Donald Trump. And if it's explained to him how stupid and how horrible he'll look, maybe he will give in to that. Who knows? The one thing you can't tell Donald Trump is you can't do that. Because the moment you say you can't do that, then he's going to push it to the limit. He's going to go over the cliff to prove he's right and everybody else is wrong. This is a trait of his narcissistic personality. So we'll see what happens. There's going to be a lot of outrage. There's going to be a lot of people that are upset, and this will all work against Donald Trump. He doesn't even realize it yet. He thinks he's an absolute genius, and whatever he says is going to work out. The funny thing is, it almost never works out when Donald Trump says or suggests something. So this is going to be interesting, what he does with FEMA. My guess is he probably doesn't touch FEMA. Somebody will probably get in his ear and say, this is political suicide. But he could. He may just do it anyway, in spite of the fact that some people tell him it's a bad idea. Because, as I've said, Donald Trump suggests he's a genius. Now, Donald Trump is also trying to do something that he perceives as popular, that he will get people on his side. And that is, he signed an executive order to release all information about the JFK assassination, the RFK assassination, and the MLK assassination. All the information from those investigations to be released in total. There'll probably be some redactions, probably a lot of redactions, but for all intents and purposes right now, it sounds like they are going to release these papers, and it's going to be interesting. What's going to be interesting is that all these people who are on TikTok and in the internet that have all these theories as to what happened. I mean, I think the idea that it was Lee Harvey Oswald, a lone gunman who shot and killed John F. Kennedy, I think there's a lot of questions to that, a lot of things that don't make sense. So hopefully we'd be able to find out more information. I mean, this happened with JFK in 63. And I think RFK and MLK were both in 68. I was 3 years old with John F. Kennedy and 8 in MLK and RFK's cases. And we still don't know much more than shortly after it happened. Like, for example, MLK. James Earl Ray was the one that was supposed to have shot MLK. But even MLK's family thinks, I don't think that's it. And that makes some sense too, because we know the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover absolutely hated MLK. He was an uppity black man who was a danger to the country because he wanted freedom and equal rights for his people. Martin Luther King was one of the few men in this country that was truly a great man. He was fighting for his people, but he was fighting for this country. He was fighting for all people. But these racist white motherfuckers refused to recognize that. And they pushed back against him. And our own government put him in jail and did all kinds of things. They did all kinds of things to try to marginalize him. So the idea that the government might be involved in that, I'm not saying it happened because I have no evidence of it, but it's worth looking into. And apparently they did look into it. And whatever they found didn't compel them to investigate further, whether it be the FBI or whatever. But it wouldn't be surprising if the FBI or the DOJ was somehow involved and they just shoved it under the rug. Well, according to Donald Trump, we're going to know. Same thing with RFK. He gets gunned down in a hotel kitchen in California. There's a lot of questionable things about that too. Sirhan was standing across the table from RFK Jr., shot at him, but there were some discoveries of some extra bullets in the walls and in the molding around the door. Um, there were bullet wounds to RFK's back at close range. That seems kind of weird when uh, Sirhan was standing several feet away across the table. A lot of questions to be answered there. And of course, JFK, his assassination has been up for grabs for 62 years. 62 years, most of my life. So Donald Trump says, yeah, we're going to release all that stuff. And Donald Trump thinks that that's going to make him popular. And it may, because there's a lot of people that want to know the answers to it. There's a lot of people on TikTok that are making money right now talking about what might have been or what could have been or what really happened. But here's the interesting thing about that. Here's the interesting thing. Somebody asked, well, if you're going to release those investigations, are you going to release the who am I trying to think of now? The guy with the island. Why the fuck? I'm tired, man. I've been up all day. And Jeffrey Epstein. Are you going to release the investigation on Jeffrey Epstein? And while he was all head up about JFK, RFK, and MLK, he goes, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to release the Epstein files. Oh, really? Because we know you're on the list and went to the island, was on his plane. As much as the Republicans want to say he wasn't, he absolutely was. And for some reason, he's all about releasing investigations, but nothing concerning him. He wanted to shut down the Jack Smith investigation and not have that released. Now he doesn't want the Epstein thing released. And there might be two reasons for that. Not only to save his own skin, but he's probably got a lot of powerful friends that would go down in flames if they ended up showing up in this investigation and we all knew about it. Donald Trump might be able to get through it all without being scathed, but some of these wealthy entertainers and business people and clergymen and all those sorts of things, they might have more problem. And Donald Trump may be getting some pressure to not release that one too. It just seems ironic that he'd want these three big ones released, but Jeffrey Epstein, not so much. Not so much. I'm not worried about that one. Well, Donnie, we're worried about it because if what happened, as we understand it, it may be one of the most egregious, abhorrent crimes in the history of this country. If we need to know about JFK, RFK, and MLK's assassination, we need to hear about the ongoing abuse of young women and possibly young men. And we need to know those powerful people, well-known people that were involved. We should have a right to know that. But apparently Donald Trump doesn't think we do have a right. So here we are. I also wanted to talk about the ICE raids. Yeah, they're already starting to happen, and it's causing quite a stir. Now, Donald Trump's border czar, as he calls himself, Tom Horman, I think his name is, he was complaining about states that would not help them gather up, round up, and ship out these illegal immigrants. He said basically, if the local police and the local government won't help out or try to hinder us in any way, they can be prosecuted. They can go to jail. That's interesting. I don't think they're going to get a lot of help from the likes of California or any of the blue states like Minnesota and New York. They're not going to get much help, and nobody's going to go to jail. Nobody's going to go to jail if the police departments don't help ICE. I've said all along that if there is concern about police officers or other members of the government pushing back against these ICE raids, if they're worried about being prosecuted, I would suggest if you want to fight against this stuff, have a lot of TV cameras there, have a lot of people with phones, get all kinds of video, because this situation going in and rounding up hundreds of brown people, the optics are not going to be good. And when it's out there enough, there will be a backlash. And then there's the other aspect of it. Again, these people are incompetent. They went into New Jersey, okay? They went into New Jersey and they rounded up some 500 potentially illegal immigrants. And when I say potentially, they didn't know if they were all illegal immigrants. They just happened to be brown in color, or they happened to speak a second language, or whatever it is. But when they were in New Jersey and they rounded up a bunch of these brown people, guess what? At least one of them was a legal citizen, by all rights, a legal citizen, and a citizen that also happened to be a veteran, a heroic veteran of the military. He was rounded up with all the illegals and put in jail. Well, that's a problem, don't you think? Don't you think it's a little troublesome that they're grabbing up anybody that looks the part and throwing them in jail and then asking questions later? That's certainly going to be a lawsuit that will be lost by the Trump administration, yet another one. And the optics aren't going to be very good. We know a lot of veterans voted for Donald Trump, and now they're seeing some things that trouble them, like releasing 1,600 insurrectionists, like scooping up a perfectly legal citizen of the United States who also happens to be a veteran. And then we hear about all these veterans' benefits that they want to cut, in spite of the fact that they said they weren't going to do that. The veterans who all voted for Donald Trump are standing back and going, hey, wait a minute. We didn't think you'd do it to us. And, you know, that's the funny thing with the Trumplafuck we had on the show yesterday. He said something that a lot of Trumplafucks say. And I find it truly amazing that they would say something like this. I would make some points about some of the things that Donald Trump said and didn't accomplish, like stopping the Ukraine war in 24 hours, like bringing down the cost of eggs and cutting energy prices in half. He said he was going to do that. That's all on videotape. It isn't hard to prove at all. It isn't hard to fact check. But this guy I talked to yesterday said, oh, of course you believe that. Nobody believed they would do it in one day. That's just how he talks. And the thing that troubles me is, so you know he didn't mean it, but he did it now. So now how do you feel? And they still support Donald Trump, even though he did what they thought he wouldn't do. Donald Trump is a pathological liar, and it's reasonable to question some of the things he says. But if it's egregious and it's harmful to people and beneficial to him, you can almost count on the fact that he's going to do it. And now there are a bunch of veterans bemoaning the fact that their benefits may be cut based on what Donald Trump has said, and they're upset about it. They're very upset about it. Well, you fucked around and you found out. You're getting what you voted for. So you need to shut up, toughen up, stop being a fucking snowflake, and take your whooping. Because you elected Donald Trump, and there is going to be whoopings handed out. And as much as you thought it would only be Democrats, well, that's not really the case. He put the hiring freeze on federal employees. And I think I talked about this yesterday, where there was a gentleman who wrote a social media post, and he was upset. He was a Trump supporter, big time Trump supporter, and his wife was a nurse that worked in veterans hospitals. And she was leaving a job and going to yet another one in Texas. She was in Dallas and moving to Waco, Texas for a better job. They sold their house. They packed everything up. They headed down to the new town. And guess what? Because of those freezes that Donald Trump put in place, her job offer was rescinded. Now you can see how that could be problematic. They sold their house. They packed everything up. They're moving to another town where there is now no job. So this guy goes on social media and he's whining and crying and saying, I know you didn't mean to do this, Donald Trump. Yeah, he meant to do it. He doesn't care about you. This is what I've been telling people over and over and over again. If you know a narcissist, you know this is true. If they want something from you, they will tell you anything to make you give them what they want. They will do anything. They will lie. They will cheat. They will steal. But once they have what they want from you, you're of no more value. They'll throw you under a bus. They'll ignore you. They'll push you down. They'll even come after you if they feel it's necessary. And that's what these people are finding out. They're finding out that Donald Trump doesn't give a shit about them. And this is going to be a very awakening time for these people. They are so bought and sold by Donald Trump that they think everything's going to be wonderful. In fact, that's what Trump will fuck say. Oh, you just wait. Everything's going to be great. How do you know it's going to be great? Well, because Donald Trump told him it was going to be great, which is well and good. But as I've said before, he's a pathological liar. If you don't take that into consideration, you're bound to be fucking disappointed. I know from whence I speak. As I've told you many times, I had a narcissistic father. And there were all kinds of wonderful promise of trips and outings and toys and stuff like that that he proclaimed that he was going to do, and it never happened. And after a period of time, you come to understand that this is all smoke and mirrors. This is all bullshit and bluster. When you're a little kid, it takes a little time to figure that out because you want to be proud of and trust in your dad. It isn't until later on when you realize you can't trust this fucking clown. And we're still at a point where Republicans don't understand that. They believe what he says, which is amazing to me because he's been lying to them for almost 10 years. And they say, oh, please give me one more. Kick me in the nuts one more fucking time. And they just don't get it. They just don't fucking get it. It's unbelievable to me. One of the other things I wanted to talk about, Donald Trump said within 24 hours of being elected, not 24 hours of being in office, 24 hours of after being elected, he would stop the Russia-Ukraine war with simple phone call. That's all he's got to do. He's got to make a phone call. Boom, it's stopped. Well, it's been well over 2 months since he's been elected. He's now currently in office, and that Ukraine war with Russia is still raging on. Now, Donald Trump did make a call to Vladimir Putin and said, you need to stop this shit right now. He had no basis for his argument. You just need to do it because I want you to do it. And if you don't do it, you're going to get taxes and tariffs and all kinds of shit. So, for all intents and purposes, he's reading his own press clippings because he's president now and he thinks he can talk shit to anybody. He thinks he can talk shit to Vladimir Putin, but Vladimir Putin is a lot like Donald Trump. You tell him no, this motherfucker's going to double down and prove to you he was right. So we got these two bullheaded dumb fucks, these cruel, criminal motherfuckers going head to head. And it'll be interesting to see who backs down first. And I think because it's Vladimir Putin and that Donald Trump is in such awe of Vladimir Putin, I think it will be him first. Now, the reason I mentioned that, Donald Trump said I could fix this easy. He looks at Ukraine as weak. And over the last 2 or 3 years that this war has been raging on, clearly Ukraine isn't weak. The weak party here is the Russians. They're having all kinds of problems. They thought they'd get it finished in 3 days, but here we are almost 3 years later, and it's still going on. Ukraine is farting. No, they're not doing that. I'm tired. Fuck, I'm tired. I haven't slept in like 20 hours. So give me a break. Anyway, they've been fighting hard. They've been doing well. America has supported them. I think most people believe now that Donald Trump is in office and he's buddies with Vladimir Putin that he won't support them anymore. And the fact of the matter is, if that doesn't happen, that paints a very bleak picture. Because if the Russians are allowed to come and take over Ukraine, you know it's just a matter of time before they go into Poland or some other country. And the problem with that is they are NATO countries. And when you hit a NATO country, every NATO country, 30 some NATO countries, will all band together and fight against the person who's trying to take over the country. Ukraine's not in NATO. That's not why that happened yet. And the reason why Ukraine isn't in NATO is because Russia negotiated a deal. People don't understand this. Ukraine had nuclear weapons. America and Russia weren't comfortable with that, especially Russia, given their neighbors. So the deal was cut that you'll get rid of all your nuclear weapons, but don't worry, America and Russia will protect you. Well, America's held up with their side of the bargain, but obviously the Russians did not. Oh, big surprise. And they, in fact, invaded Ukraine as opposed to protecting them. So therein lies the problem. And Donald Trump thought he could fix this really quick. And he really gave a tell yesterday. Because when he was asked about the Ukraine-Russia war. He says, I want it over. There's a lot of people dying. There's this, that, and the other thing. Like Donald Trump gives a fuck, which of course he does not. And he's the telling comment he made was, I think when they came into the Ukraine, when Russia came into the Ukraine, Ukraine just shouldn't have fought back. Oh, Mr. Tough Guy thinks these people should just stand there while Russia takes their country. What kind of strategy is that? What kind of negotiation is that? There is no way Zelensky is going to agree with giving up land or portions of his country to Russia, giving them exactly what they want. It's just not going to fucking happen. So we know that Donald Trump is in cahoots with Vladimir Putin. Donald Trump thinks he's big, powerful America, and he can pressure and force Zelensky to give up. This is the essence of who bullies are. And Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin are the epitome of bullies. And that's always been Donald Trump's plan. Put enough pressure on Ukraine, make them give up, and let Russia do whatever they want. For some reason, that's not problematic for the Republican Party. They're not thinking ahead. They're just thinking, we want to win for Donald Trump. But that would be absolutely disastrous for this world, more specifically Europe. And the people in Europe are terrified of this prospect too. So don't be surprised if Europe countries or the EU step in, pick up the slack from where the Americans will fall short because Donald Trump will refuse to help out Ukraine. And then it will get a little ugly over there. And it's all because of Donald Trump. That's what you can expect. That's what is likely to happen. And it's concerning. So you see, we have problems here in this country, very concerning problems in this country. But we also have an international situation. Now, Donald Trump had his first shot at an international debut for this term. There was an economics conference in Davos, Switzerland, and all the dignitaries were there. And Donald Trump was there virtually via Zoom or whatever the fuck he was on. And he gave his little speech. And as I said earlier, it was absolutely unhinged. He was talking about everything but economics. He was talking about the election. He was talking about abortion. He was talking about everything. And as I said early on, people aren't scared of him anymore. People are pissed off and people are laughing at him. And during this conference, that's exactly what happened. People, dignitaries, leaders were listening to this rubbish, this unhinged bullshit, and they were laughing at him. There's the president in Mexico, Scheinbaum. As we've said, these ICE raids are already taking place, and what they are doing is putting them on planes and sending them to Mexico. The only thing is, President Scheinbaum of Mexico was an incredibly bright and strong leader, a woman, and she is a very strong leader. So this is something that bothers Donald Trump in the first place. But Donald Trump is sending these plane loads of illegal immigrants, presumably Mexicans, but probably not, mostly Central and South America. They're coming into the country by way of Mexico. And President Scheinbaum said, yeah, we're not letting that plane land. They sent them down to Guatemala or whatever the fuck. But President Scheinbaum has had just about enough of this motherfucker. The people in Greenland and Denmark have had enough of that shit. As I told you before, Donald Trump keeps talking about wanting to buy Greenland like there's any hope in hell that that's going to happen, and it's not. There was a upper echelon politician in Denmark that came out and said, look, Denmark and Greenland have been tied together for 800 years. Greenland is not for sale. You're not going to buy it. And this guy was pretty irate, and he wrapped it up and he says, I'll say it in terms you can understand, Mr. President. Fuck off. Now, he got in a little trouble with his government for saying that, but there's no accounting for accuracy. The right response to somebody like Donald Trump with such a ridiculous, stupid idea is to fuck off. That's what you need to do with Donald Trump. All right, we're going to wrap things up for the Rational Boomer podcast. I'm going to get some sleep because I got to do all this shit over again tomorrow, TikToks and YouTube and all this stuff. And I'm looking forward to it, but I need to go to fucking bed. I really do. So I hope you have a great day, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.